The Texas sun didn't apologize for anything. It rose mean and stayed that way, turning the Calder Ranch into a skillet by 8 in the morning. Rhea wiped the sweat from her eyes with a forearm already caked in dust and checked the fence line for the third time that week. Another post had rotted through. Another $15 she didn't have. "Goddamn wood's older than I am," she muttered, testing the fence with her boot. It gave like wet paper. Her mare, a gray-dappled Mustang named Ash, snorted and stamped. "Yeah, I know. Add it to the list." The list was getting longer. Had been for 2 years now, ever since her father's heart gave out in the north pasture and left her with 300 acres of hardpan, a mortgage the bank was getting impatient about, and a reputation in town that ranged from peculiar to plain unnatural. Women didn't run ranches alone. Women didn't handle cattle, fix windmills, or sleep with a rifle by the bed. Women certainly didn't tell the Robertson brothers to go straight to hell when they offered to help manage things. But Rhea Calder wasn't interested in being the kind of woman people expected. She was 28 years old and looked older, face weathered to leather, hands scarred from wire and rope, shoulders broad from hauling feed sacks that weighed more than most saloon girls. Her dark hair, which she kept chopped short with kitchen shears, stuck out from under her hat in uneven chunks. Pretty wasn't something she'd ever had time for, and handsome had left the building around the same time her mother died, bringing her into the world. What she had was stubborn. That, and about 60 head of cattle that needed moving to summer pasture before the water dried up completely. She mounted Ash and started north, scanning the horizon for strays. The pain in her right side, the one that had been bothering her for the past month, flared hot and insistent. She ignored it the way she ignored most inconvenient truths, by working harder. By noon, she'd found 12 of the strays and pushed them toward the main herd. The pain had graduated from annoying to serious, a deep ache that radiated up into her ribs and made breathing an active decision. She stopped to rest in the shade of a scraggly mesquite, pressing her palm against her side and feeling something hard beneath the skin. "Probably just bruised it on the fence," she said to Ash. The mare didn't look convinced. Rhea had bruised plenty of things in her life. This would heal like everything else, with time and spite. She made it back to the house by 3, fed the chickens, checked the well, and discovered the pump needed a new gasket. She added it to the list, then made herself eat something, salt pork and yesterday's cornbread, washed down with coffee that could strip paint. The pain was worse when she sat still, so she didn't sit still. She mucked the stalls, patched a hole in the barn roof, and split enough wood to last the week. By sunset, she was shaking. She told herself it was just fatigue. She'd been pushing hard, harder than usual maybe, but that was the job. The ranch didn't care if you were tired, the cattle didn't care if you hurt. You did the work, or you lost everything. She made it to bed around 10 and lay there staring at the ceiling, one hand pressed to her side, feeling her pulse throb against her palm. The pain had teeth now, sharp ones. "Tomorrow," she whispered to the darkness. "If it's not better tomorrow, I'll figure something out." But tomorrow came with a calf tangled in wire, and the day after that brought a leak in the barn roof that turned into a flood during the afternoon storm. The pain became background noise, something she worked around the way she worked around broken equipment and dwindling funds. You adapted, you managed, you survived. 3 weeks later, she knew she was in trouble. The pain had spread into her back, her shoulder, down her leg. Some mornings, she couldn't stand up straight for the first 10 minutes. She threw up twice after breakfast and told herself it was bad meat. When she looked in the cracked mirror over the wash basin, the woman staring back had yellow around the eyes and skin the color of old paper. "You look like hell," she informed her reflection. Her reflection didn't argue. The decision to go into town wasn't really a decision. It was defeat dressed up as practicality. She needed supplies anyway. Fence wire, lamp oil, flour if the store had any at a reasonable price. She could stop by the doctor's office, just to ask a question or two. Nothing serious. She made the ride into Broken Creek on a Thursday morning because Thursdays were quiet. Less chance of running into people who wanted to talk about how she was managing or whether she'd considered selling, or had she heard that nice Mr. Peterson was looking for a wife. And wouldn't it be sensible to... The town looked the same as it always did. One main street of sun-bleached wood and broken promises, a handful of businesses clinging to life because there was nowhere else to go. The saloon, the general store, the bank that held her father's mortgage and her future in its ledgers. And at the far end, past the blacksmith and the boarding house, a small office with a neat sign that read, E. Varn, M.D. Rhea had seen the sign go up 6 months ago, but never paid it much attention. Doctors came and went in towns like Broken Creek. They showed up full of optimism and Eastern medical degrees, discovered that frontier medicine mostly involved digging bullets out of drunks and lying to consumptives, then caught the next stage back to civilization. This one had stayed, though. She'd heard talk about him, a man from back east somewhere, kept to himself, didn't drink, didn't gamble, didn't visit the girls above the saloon. People said he was good at his job. People also said he was strange, but people said that about anyone who read books and used words with more than 2 syllables. She tied Ash to the post outside the general store and stood there for a minute, one hand pressed to her side, building up the nerve to walk 20 yards down a dusty street. You buying something or just admiring the architecture? Rhea turned. Sarah Kemp, the storekeeper's wife, stood in the doorway with a broom, watching her with the kind of aggressive friendliness that made Rhea's teeth ache. "Supplies," Rhea said. "Got a list." "Well, come on in then. Got flour in yesterday, and Jim just put out some new fabric, real pretty calico." "Just the supplies, Sarah." Inside, the store smelled like coffee and leather, and the peppermint sticks Sarah kept in a jar for children who didn't scream. Rhea moved through the narrow aisles, gathering what she needed and keeping her head down. The pain was a constant throb now, making her clumsy. She knocked over a display of canned peaches and had to steady herself against the counter. "You all right, honey?" Sarah's voice had shifted from friendly to concerned, which was worse. "Fine. Just need to settle up." Sarah rang up her purchases with a running commentary about weather, crops, and the scandalous behavior of the new saloon girl. Rhea paid, tucked her goods into her saddlebag, and stood in the street trying to decide if she was brave enough or desperate enough to walk those 20 yards. Desperate one. The doctor's office was cleaner than she expected. No sawdust on the floor, no tobacco stains on the walls. Everything was organized. Glass cabinets with instruments arranged by size, books on shelves, a desk with papers in neat stacks. It looked like a place where things made sense, where problems had solutions that came in bottles with Latin labels. "I'll be right with you." The voice came from behind a curtained-off area in the back. Male, with an accent she couldn't place. Not quite northern, not quite southern. Educated, though. You could hear it in the vowels. Rhea stood in the middle of the room, suddenly aware of how she must look. Dust-covered, smelling like horse and sweat, her shirt stained with God knew what. She almost left. Would have, probably, if the curtain hadn't swept aside. Dr. Elias Varn wasn't what she expected. He was younger than most doctors she'd known, mid-30s maybe, with dark hair going gray at the temples and eyes that were too sharp, too knowing. He wore a clean white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, revealing forearms marked with thin scars she recognized, surgical cuts, learning marks from medical school. He wasn't tall, barely matched her height, but he carried himself like a man who'd never needed size to make a point. "Miss Calder," he said it like a statement, not a question. "You know me?" "Small town. You run the Calder Ranch." He moved to the desk, picked up a pen. "What can I do for you?" No preliminaries, no small talk. Rhea appreciated that. "Got a pain?" she said. "Right side. Thought maybe you could tell me what it is. How long have you had it?" "Month or so." His eyes flicked up from the paper. "Or so." 6 weeks? Maybe 8? "Maybe 8. He set the pen down. "And you're just now coming in." It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. "Been busy." "Too busy to address something that's been causing you pain for 2 months." It wasn't that bad at first. And now? Now it felt like something was eating her from the inside out. Now she couldn't sleep through the night. Now she was afraid, genuinely, coldly afraid, in a way she hadn't been since she was 14 and found her father unconscious in the field. "Now I'm here," she said. He studied her for a moment, and she had the uncomfortable feeling that he was seeing past the dirt and the defensive posture to something she kept locked down tight. Then he gestured to an examination table. "Let's take a look." The examination was thorough and humiliating. He He palpated her abdomen with careful fingers, asking questions she didn't want to answer about appetite, nausea, bowel movements, and a dozen other private matters. When he pressed on the right side,
This
just below her
story was
ribs,
posted on the
pain
channel
flared so
west of
bright she
Betrayal.
gasped.
Please do not repost
Sorry,
it in any
he said,
form.
but he didn't stop. His hands moved with precise certainty, mapping territory she'd been ignoring. When was your last full meal? This morning. That you kept down. She didn't answer. Miss Calder, when was the last time you ate something and didn't immediately vomit it back up? 3 days? Maybe 4? He made a sound that wasn't quite disapproval, wasn't quite sympathy. You can sit up. She did, slower than she wanted to, and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Well? She heard the challenge in her own voice, the edge that kept people at a distance. Your gallbladder is inflamed, he said. Likely has been for some time. There are probably stones blocking the duct, which is causing the pain and the jaundice I can see in your eyes. Left untreated, it will rupture. When that happens, you'll develop peritonitis and you'll die. Painfully. The words landed like punches. Rhea sat very still, hands gripping the edge of the table. How long? Until it ruptures? Impossible to say. Could be tomorrow, could be 3 weeks, but it will happen. What do I need to do? Surgery. I'll need to remove the gallbladder entirely. Can't you just give me something for the pain? I could give you morphine. It would make you comfortable while you die. She flinched at that, at the blunt honesty of it. Most doctors she'd known wrapped bad news in soft words and vague promises. Not this one. How much? She asked, because that's what it always came down to. Money. The thing she never had enough of. For the surgery? $50. That includes the hospital stay. You'll need to be here for at least a week afterward. $50 might as well have been $500. She didn't have it. The ranch barely turned enough profit to cover the mortgage, and what little she had in the bank was earmarked for winter feed. I'll need time, she said, to get the money together. You don't have time. Then I'll work something out. Payment plan, maybe, or Miss Calder. He leaned against the desk, arms crossed. You're dying. This isn't a negotiation. Everything's a negotiation. Not this, not death. They stared at each other across the clean, well-ordered room. Outside, someone laughed. A dog barked. Life going on like normal, like her insides weren't rotting, like she wasn't standing on the edge of a cliff trying to figure out if she could fly. I can't afford it, she said finally. The admission tasted like ash. Not right now. I need a few months to sell some cattle, maybe take out a loan. You'll be dead in a few months. Then I guess that's that. She slid off the table, ignoring the way the room tilted. Her hand found the wall, steadied herself. She could feel him watching her, could feel the weight of his attention like pressure against her skin. Where are you going? Home. Got work to do. You just told me you can't afford the surgery that will save your life, and your solution is to go home and do chores? What else am I supposed to do? The words came out sharper than she intended. Sit here and wait for you to fix me out of the goodness of your heart? I'm not a charity case, doctor. I'm not suggesting you are. Then what are you suggesting? He pushed off from the desk, moved closer. Not threatening, he wasn't a large man, wasn't physically imposing, but there was something about him that made her aware of how small the room had become. I'm suggesting, he said quietly, that you let me help you. I don't need help. You need surgery. Which I can't afford, which means I'll do it for free. The offer hung in the air between them, impossible and insulting all at once. Why? She asked. Why what? Why would you do that? You don't know me. You don't owe me anything. Does there need to be a reason beyond not wanting to watch you die of something preventable? Yes. He smiled at that, a small, tired expression that didn't reach his eyes. You're a suspicious woman, Miss Calder. I'm a practical woman. Nobody does something for nothing. Then consider it an investment in my reputation, a successful surgery on a hopeless case. That's the kind of thing that brings in paying patients. It was a reasonable explanation, almost believable. But there was something in the way he said it, some note of insincerity that made her think he was lying. Not about doing the surgery, She believed that part. But about why? I can't accept that, she said. Why not? Because I don't take handouts. It's not a handout, it's medical care. Charity medical care. Does it matter? Yes, it matters. I've spent my whole life proving I don't need anyone's pity or patronage or... What you need, he interrupted, is to stop being stubborn long enough to accept help when it's offered. The words hit harder than they should have. She felt her jaw tighten, felt anger rise up to replace the fear that had been sitting in her chest since he'd said the word surgery. You don't know anything about me. I know you're proud. I know you'd rather die than admit you can't handle something. And I know that in about 2 weeks, maybe less, you're going to collapse somewhere on that ranch of yours, and by the time someone finds you, it'll be too late. That's my choice to make. Is it? He took another step closer. They were almost toe-to-toe now, close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his dark eyes. Because from where I'm standing, it looks less like a choice and more like stubbornness dressed up as independence. You're not refusing help because you don't need it. You're refusing it because accepting it would mean admitting you're not invincible. I never said I was invincible. You live like it. I live like I have to. And if you keep living like that, you'll die like it too. Alone. In pain. And for what? Pride? She wanted to hit him. Wanted to tell him he was wrong, that he didn't understand. That a man like him, educated, respectable, probably had money in the bank and a family somewhere, couldn't possibly know what it was like to fight for every scrap of dignity in a world that wanted to take it from you. But the truth was sitting heavy in her gut, right next to the inflamed gallbladder that was apparently trying to kill her. He was right. She was going to die if she didn't accept his help, and she was too proud to accept his help, which meant she was going to die. The math was simple and brutal. I need to think about it, she said. You don't have time to think about it. I need to think about it, she repeated, and pushed past him toward the door. Miss Calder. Thank you for your time, doctor. She was out the door before he could stop her, back in the street with the sun beating down and the world carrying on like her life wasn't unraveling thread by thread. Ash was waiting where she'd left her. Rhea untied the reins with shaking hands and pulled herself into the saddle. The pain flared, bright and vicious, and she had to bite back a sound that was half gasp, half sob. Home, she told the mare. Let's go home. The ride back took twice as long as the ride in. She had to stop 3 times to let the nausea pass, to breathe through the pain that was no longer content to stay in her side, but had decided to take up residence in her entire torso. By the time she reached the ranch, the sun was setting and she was barely conscious. She made it to the porch before her legs gave out. She woke to darkness and the sound of coyotes singing to the moon. Her mouth tasted like copper. The pain had dulled to a deep, constant ache that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. Move, she told herself. Get up. You've got work tomorrow. But her body wasn't interested in listening. Her body, it seemed, had finally had enough. She lay on the porch boards and stared up at the stars. The same stars her father had taught her to navigate by. The same stars that had watched her mother die and her father follow. Indifferent. Eternal. Beautiful in their cold, distant way. I'm not ready, she whispered to them. I'm not done yet. The stars, predictably, didn't answer. She must have passed out again, because the next thing she knew, it was dawn and the rooster was screaming and everything hurt. She actually crawled, to the door, got it open, made it inside to the kitchen. Water. She needed water. The pump handle felt like it weighed 100 pounds. She worked it anyway, filled a tin cup, drank, vomited, filled it again. This time it stayed down. She looked at the window. Sunrise painted the sky in shades of orange and gold. Beautiful. Another day she couldn't afford to lose. You're being a fool, she said to her reflection in the window glass. A damn fool. But she didn't know how to be anything else. The morning chores took 3 hours instead of 1. She fell twice, once in the chicken coop, once in the barn, and each time it took longer to get back up. By noon she was running a fever, could feel it burning behind her eyes, turning her thoughts sluggish and strange. She tried to eat and couldn't. Tried to work and made it 10 minutes before the pain drove her to her knees. This was dying. She understood that now, this slow unraveling, this gradual loss of control. Her body was shutting down piece by piece, and there wasn't a damn thing she could do about it except endure.
This
Or
story
accept
was
help.
posted on the channel
The
west
thought
of
kept circling
betrayal.
back,
Please do not
unwelcome and
repost it
persistent.
in any form.
Dr. Varn's offer, free surgery, free care. All she had to do was swallow her pride and say yes. But pride was all she had left. Pride in this failing body and 300 acres of stubborn, unforgiving land. She made it through the day, and the next, and the one after that. On the fourth day, she realized she couldn't see properly out of her right eye. On the fifth day, she couldn't make it out of bed before noon. On the sixth day, she stopped trying. She lay in sixth day, she stopped trying. She lay in her father's old bed, in the room where he'd died, and waited for her body to make the decision for her. It almost did. She woke, if you could call it waking, to the sound of hoofbeats. Multiple horses, voices, someone pounding on the door. "Miss Calder! Rhea!" She tried to answer and managed a sound somewhere between a cough and a groan. The door crashed open. Footsteps. More voices. Urgent now. "Jesus Christ, there she is. Get the doctor. Rhea, can you hear me? Stay with us, girl." Hands on her, lifting. The world tilted and spun, and the pain exploded into something beyond pain, beyond description. Then nothing. When she surfaced again, she was moving. Wagon bed, she thought, could feel the rattle of wheels beneath her, the sway and bounce of rough road. Someone had covered her with a blanket. Someone was talking in low, urgent tones. "Ma'am, ooh." Found her this morning when I came by about the cattle deal. Door was open, chickens scattered, knew something was wrong. "How long has she been like this?" "I don't know. Days, maybe. You saw the state of the place." That voice. She knew that voice. Dr. Varn. She tried to open her eyes and failed, tried to speak and managed only a whisper. "Stubborn, idiot." "Save your strength, Miss Calder." His voice close now, a hand on her forehead, cool and steady. "We're almost there." "Told you." "Didn't need." "I know what you told me. You were wrong." She wanted to argue, but consciousness was slipping away again, pulling her down into darkness that was almost peaceful. The next time she woke, she was in the doctor's office, on his examination table, and the pain was different, sharper, more immediate. "Going to put you under now," he was saying. "When you wake up, this will be over." Wait, no more waiting, no more arguments. His face appeared above her, those sharp eyes holding hers. "Trust me." "Don't know how? Then learn." A cloth pressed over her nose and mouth, a smell like ether, and something else, something sweet. The world began to recede. "Don't let me die," she heard herself say. "I won't." His voice followed her down into the dark. "I promise." And then there was nothing at all. The pain came back first, which meant she was alive. Rhea surfaced slowly, like climbing up through thick mud. Everything felt distant and wrong. Her mouth tasted like metal and rot. Her body didn't respond the way it should, and there was a pressure in her abdomen that hadn't been there before. Or maybe it had. Hard to remember. She forced her eyes open. The ceiling above her was unfamiliar, clean white plaster instead of water-stained wood. A lamp burned somewhere to her left, casting soft yellow light across what appeared to be a small room. Not her bedroom. Not her house. Easy now. She turned her head. Too fast, the room spun, and found Dr. Varn sitting in a chair beside the bed. He looked exhausted. His shirt was wrinkled, sleeves still rolled up, and there was a stain on his collar that might have been blood. Her blood, probably. "What?" Her voice came out as a croak. She tried again. "What happened?" "I removed your gallbladder." He stood, poured water from a pitcher into a glass. 3 hours ago. You're in the recovery room behind my office." He held the glass to her lips, and she drank, hating how weak she felt, how dependent. The water hurt going down, but she finished it anyway. "The ranch is being looked after. Tom Henderson, the man who found you. He's making sure your animals are fed." Tom Henderson, the cattle buyer she'd been negotiating with. She had a vague memory of agreeing to meet with him, of leaving the door unlocked because she'd been too sick to care about visitors or thieves or anything beyond the pain. "I need to get back." You need to stay in bed for at least a week, maybe 2. I don't have 2 weeks. The cattle need moving. The fence. Miss Calder. He set the glass down with more force than necessary. You just had major surgery. Your body needs time to heal. If you tear those stitches, if you develop an infection, everything I just did will be for nothing. Then you wasted your time. Apparently so. They glared at each other in the lamplight. Outside, she could hear the town settling in for the night. Horses, voices, the distant sound of a piano from the saloon. Normal life continuing without her. How much do I owe you? She asked. We discussed this already. No, you made an offer I didn't accept. Now the surgery's done, so tell me the price. $50 like I said, which I'm not collecting. That wasn't our agreement. We didn't have an agreement. I found you half dead and operated to save your life. There's no transaction here. Everything's a transaction. Not this. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. The pain in her abdomen went from dull ache to sharp scream in less than a second. She gasped, fell back against the pillows. Stop being an idiot, he said, but his hands were already there, steadying her, adjusting the pillows. You're going to hurt yourself. Already hurt. And it'll get worse if you don't rest. She closed her eyes, focused on breathing through the pain. When it subsided to something manageable, she opened them again and found him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Why? She asked. Why did you do this? I already told you the truth this time. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled the chair closer and sat down, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. 3 years ago, he said quietly, I worked at a hospital in Philadelphia. Big place, well-funded, all the latest equipment. A woman came in with appendicitis. Simple case, should have been routine. But she didn't have money for the surgery, and the hospital had a policy. No payment, no treatment. Rhea waited. I operated anyway. Used the emergency room after hours, did everything I could, but it was too late. The appendix had already ruptured. She died 2 days later from sepsis. He paused. She was 26 years old, had 3 children, died because she couldn't afford $50, and I didn't act fast enough. That wasn't your fault? Wasn't it? I knew the policy. I knew what would happen. And I waited, tried to find a way around it, tried to get the board to make an exception. By the time I stopped following rules and started following my conscience, it was too late. So this is about guilt. This is about not making the same mistake twice. He met her eyes. When you walked into my office, I saw that woman again. Proud, stubborn, dying because she couldn't afford help. And I decided I wasn't going to let that happen again. The honesty of it caught her off guard. She'd expected a dozen things, pity, condescension, some savior complex that needed feeding, but not this raw admission of failure. What happened after? She asked. After she died? I was dismissed from the hospital. They called it conduct unbecoming and misuse of facilities. Really, it was about liability and reputation. He smiled without humor. Turns out saving poor people is bad for business. So you came here. Needed a fresh start. Broken Creek seemed as good a place as any. It's not. I'm beginning to realize that. She studied him in the lamplight. This strange, stubborn man who'd saved her life for reasons that had nothing to do with her and everything to do with ghosts he carried. She understood ghosts, had plenty of her own. I'm still paying you, she said. Miss Calder. Rhea. If you're going to argue with me, at least use my name. Rhea. He said it carefully, like he was testing the weight of it. You don't have $50. I'll get it. Sell some cattle, take out a loan. The same plan that was going to kill you 2 weeks ago. I'll figure something out. Why does this matter so much to you? Because I don't owe anyone anything. That's how I've kept this ranch, how I've survived. The minute I start taking handouts, the minute I admit I can't make it on my own, she stopped, surprised by the emotion in her own voice. Then what? Then what's the point? My father built that ranch from nothing, died protecting it, and I've spent 10 years proving I could do the same, that I didn't need help from the bank or the neighbors or anyone else. If I start now, you think it makes you weak. I know it does. You're wrong. Easy for you to say. Is it? He leaned back, studying her. I lost everything because I couldn't ask for help. Couldn't admit the system was broken. Couldn't tell anyone I was drowning in debt from medical school. Couldn't say out loud that I was scared I'd made the wrong choices. You know what that got me? Nothing. Just a
This
longer
story
fall.
was posted on the channel
That's
West
different.
of Betrayal.
How?
Please do not repost
She opened her
it in
mouth
any
to argue
form.
and found she didn't have an answer. Or maybe she did, but it was wrapped up in years of her father's voice telling her to be strong, be tough, never show weakness, because weakness was blood in the water and the world was full of sharks. I need to think, she said finally. You need to sleep. We can argue about payment later. He stood to leave and she caught his wrist without thinking. His skin was warm under her fingers, calloused in places she wouldn't have expected from a doctor. Thank you, she said. The words felt rusty, unpracticed. For saving my life. You're welcome. He left her there in the lamplight, and she fell asleep still holding the ghost of his warmth in her palm. The next 3 days passed in a blur of discomfort and unwanted dependency. Rhea hated every minute of it, hated being stuck in bed, hated the way her body refused to cooperate, hated the steady stream of visitors who came by to check on her, like she was some kind of invalid. Sarah Kemp brought soup. Tom Henderson brought news of her cattle. Even the Robertson brothers, those persistent bastards, showed up with flowers and offers to help manage things until she was back on her feet. We could work out an arrangement, Robert Robertson said, hat in hand, trying to look sincere. Just temporary, of course, until you're well. No, Rhea said from her bed. Now, don't be hasty. I said no. Miss Calder, you're in no position to be stubborn. She said no. Dr. Varn appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. I believe that's clear enough. The Robertson brothers left, grumbling about ungrateful women and missed opportunities. Rhea watched them go with grim satisfaction. You didn't have to do that, she told Varn. Yes, I did. They were giving you a headache and you're supposed to be resting. How did you know they were giving me a headache? Because they give everyone a headache. He moved to check her bandages, his hands careful and professional. How's the pain? Manageable. That's not an answer. It's the one you're getting. He made a sound that might have been amusement and continued his examination. His fingers pressed gently around the incision, checking for signs of infection. She forced herself to stay still, to not flinch away from the intimacy of it. Healing well, he said finally. No signs of infection. You're lucky. Luck had nothing to do with it. You knew what you were doing. I like to think so, but surgery is always a risk. You worried? Of course I was worried. You nearly died on the table twice. The casual way he said it made her stomach drop. You didn't mention that. You were unconscious. Seemed pointless to bring up after the fact. Still should have told me. Why? So you could feel guilty about almost dying? He packed up his medical bag. You're alive, that's what matters. To you, maybe. He paused at that, looked at her with those sharp, measuring eyes. You think I did this for myself? I think you did it for that woman in Philadelphia. I'm just a convenient substitute. That's remarkably cynical. That's remarkably honest. Fair enough. He sat down in the chair that had become his usual spot. You want the truth? Yes, I thought about her. Thought about all the patients I couldn't save, all the times money or policy or my own fear got in the way of doing what needed to be done. But that doesn't make you a substitute. You're a person who needed help, and I had the skills to provide it. That's all. That's never all. Why do you fight this so hard? Fight what? The idea that someone might help you without wanting something in return. She didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, she had too many answers, all tangled up with memories of neighbors who'd offered help after her father died, then expected her to sell them the ranch at a discount, of men who'd been kind until she made it clear she wasn't interested in marriage, of a world that had taught her, over and over, that nothing came free. Experience, she said finally. Bad experience. The only kind I've got. He nodded slowly, like he understood. Maybe he did. He'd lost his position, his reputation, probably friends and colleagues too. He knew about the price of trusting wrong. You planning to keep me here much longer? She asked, changing the subject. Another 4 days at least, maybe a week. I don't have a week. You don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Not one that doesn't involve bleeding to death in your barn. He stood. I need to check on another patient. Get some rest. Stop telling me to rest. Stop ignoring medical advice. He left before she could respond, and she was alone again with her thoughts and the persistent ache in her abdomen that reminded her just how close she'd come to dying. On the 5th day, she was allowed to sit up. On the 6th, she could walk to the door and back without feeling like her insides were tearing loose. On the 7th, she told Varn she was leaving. No, he said, wasn't asking permission. You're not ready. I'm ready enough. They were in his office, her standing by the desk while he organized papers with sharp, angry movements. She'd learned to read his moods over the past week, the tiny tells that showed when he was frustrated or worried or just tired of arguing with stubborn patients. If you tear those stitches, I won't. You don't know that. Neither do you. He set down the papers and turned to face her. Why are you so determined to hurt yourself? I'm not trying to hurt myself. I'm trying to get back to my life. Your life nearly killed you. And sitting here doing nothing is killing me now, just slower. That's not... He stopped, rubbed his face. You're impossible. So I've been told. Fine, go home. Tear your stitches. Develop an infection. Die in your barn, surrounded by ungrateful cattle. See if I care. You do care. That's the problem. The words hung between them, more honest than she'd intended. His expression shifted. Surprise, maybe, or recognition. Yes, he said quietly. I do care. Against my better judgment, apparently. Don't. Too late. She didn't know what to do with that, so she did what she always did when things got complicated. She left, walked out of his office into the bright afternoon sun, untied Ash from the post where Tom Henderson had brought her, and rode home. The ranch looked worse than she remembered. The chickens had scattered into the brush. The barn door hung crooked on its hinges. Weeds had taken over the kitchen garden, and something, coyote probably, had knocked over the feed bins and scattered grain across the yard. She stood in the middle of it all, taking inventory of the damage, and felt something close to despair. A week. She'd been gone a week, and it looked like months of neglect. One thing at a time, she told herself. Start with the chickens. It took her 3 hours to round them up, and by the end she was shaking with exhaustion. The incision pulled with every movement, a constant reminder that her body wasn't ready for this. But she kept going anyway, because stopping meant thinking, and thinking meant acknowledging just how much she'd lost. She'd just gotten the last hen back in the coop when she heard hoofbeats. Tom Henderson rode up, looking apologetic. Heard you were back. Came to check on things. Things are fine. He looked around the yard at the scattered feed, the broken door, the general state of chaos, and had the grace not to comment. About that cattle deal, he said. I know you've been sick, but I've got a buyer waiting. If you're still interested, I'm interested. Good. I can come by tomorrow, help you move them to the north pasture. I can handle it. Miss Calder, no offense, but you look like you're about to fall over. I'm fine. You're not fine. You just had surgery. How do you... She stopped. Small town. Of course everyone knew. Probably had opinions about it too. I can manage. I'm sure you can, but you don't have to. I've got 3 hands who can help move the cattle. Won't cost you anything. Consider it part of the deal. She wanted to refuse. Every instinct told her to send him away, to handle this herself like she'd handled everything else. But her body was already betraying her, legs shaking, vision starting to blur at the edges. Fine, she said. Tomorrow morning. He tipped his hat and left, and she made it exactly 5 more steps before her legs gave out. She sat down hard in the dirt, one hand pressed to her abdomen where the incision was screaming, and admitted, just to herself, just for a moment, that she might be in over her head. She was still sitting there when the second horse arrived. Doctor. Varn dismounted with the careful movements of someone who didn't spend much time on horseback. He tied his horse next to Ash and stood looking down at her with an expression that managed to be both exasperated and unsurprised. Don't, she said. Don't what? Don't say you told me so. I wasn't going to. He knelt down beside her, checking her pulse with professional efficiency. "I was going to say you're an idiot. Already know that."
This story was
"Apparently
posted
not.
on the
Or you
channel
wouldn't be
west
sitting in
of
the dirt
Betrayal.
12 hours after
Please
major
do not
surgery."
repost it in any
"It's
form.
my dirt." "That doesn't make it better." He helped her up. She tried not to lean on him and failed, and got her into the house. The inside was worse than the outside. Dishes piled in the sink, dust everywhere. Her father's old rifle still propped in the corner where she'd left it before riding into town that first day. Varn looked around with the same carefully neutral expression he'd used when examining her gallbladder. "When was the last time you ate?" he asked. "This morning." A lie, but a convincing one. "Try again." "Yesterday." The truth this time. She tried to remember and couldn't. 3 days ago. Maybe 4. He muttered something that sounded like a curse and started opening cabinets. "Do you have any food in this house that isn't hardtack or salt pork?" "There's beans." "Of course there is." He set about making something edible with the efficiency of a man who'd cooked for himself plenty of times. She watched from the table, too tired to argue, as he boiled water and sorted through her meager supplies. "Why are you here?" she asked. "Because I knew you'd do something stupid." "How'd you know where I live?" "Small town. Everyone knows where everyone lives." "Fair point." He set a bowl in front of her, beans and cornbread, simple but hot. She ate mechanically, barely tasting it, while he stood by the stove watching her like she might collapse at any moment. "You can't keep doing this," he said. "Eating? Pretending you don't need help." "I don't need help." "You literally just collapsed in your yard." That was a momentary setback. That was your body telling you to stop being stubborn and accept reality. Reality is, I've got a ranch to run and no one to run it but me. So hire someone. With what money? The money from the cattle sale. That money is going to the mortgage and winter feed. There's nothing left for hired help. He pulled out a chair and sat down across from her. What if there was another option? Like what? Like accepting my offer. No payment for the surgery. Use the cattle money for help instead. We've had this conversation. And we'll keep having it until you see sense. She set down her spoon. Why does this matter to you? I already told you what, not the dead woman in Philadelphia, you. Why do you care what happens to me? He was quiet for a long moment, studying his hands. They were good hands, she noticed, strong and careful, marked with the same kinds of scars that covered hers. I don't know, he said finally. Maybe because you remind me of myself. Stubborn, proud, convinced that asking for help is the same as admitting defeat. He looked up. Maybe because I see you heading for the same cliff I went over, and I'm hoping you're smart enough to stop before you fall. And if I'm not, then I'll be here to patch you up after you hit the ground. The certainty in his voice should have annoyed her. Instead, it did something stranger, made her feel seen in a way that was both uncomfortable and oddly reassuring. I can't afford to owe people, she said quietly. Every debt is a hook they can use to pull you where they want. I learned that early. Not all debts work that way. All the ones I've seen do. Then you've been dealing with the wrong people. Haven't exactly had a choice in that. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than she was saying. What if we made a different arrangement? Something that doesn't feel like charity. Like what? You need help running this place. He paused, considering. I need something to do besides treating drunk cowboys and lying to consumptives. You want to work on my ranch? I want to help. There's a difference. Not much of one. The difference is I'm offering as a friend, not a creditor. Friend. The word felt foreign in her mouth, like something from another language. She didn't have friends, had neighbors she tolerated, business associates she dealt with, and a whole town full of people who'd happily watch her fail. We barely know each other, she pointed out. Whose fault is that? Mine, probably. Definitely. He stood, started clearing dishes. Think about it. I'll come by tomorrow either way, make sure those stitches are holding. You don't need to. Yes, I do. Doctor's orders. He left before she could argue further, and she sat in the gathering darkness of her father's kitchen, trying to figure out when her life had gotten so complicated. The next morning brought Tom Henderson and his 3 ranch hands, who moved her cattle with the kind of casual competence that made her simultaneously grateful and resentful. Dr. Varn showed up around noon to check her incision and stayed to fix the broken barn door. "I can do that," she told him. "I know, but I'm already here." She watched him work from the porch, too sore to do much besides sit and feel useless. He moved with the same careful precision he brought to medicine, measuring twice, cutting once, testing the hinges before declaring them sound. "Where'd you learn carpentry?" she asked. "My father was a builder, wanted me to follow in his footsteps. But you became a doctor instead. Seemed more respectable. Turned out I was wrong about that." He came up to the porch, wiping sawdust from his hands. His shirt was damp with sweat, collar unbuttoned. It was the most informal she'd ever seen him. "Thank you," she said, "for the door." "You're welcome. And for everything else." "Also welcome." They sat in silence for a while, watching the sun move across the sky. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it wasn't uncomfortable either. Just 2 people who'd survived things, trying to figure out what came next. "I'll pay you back," she said eventually. "For the surgery. It might take a while, but I'll do it. If that's what you need." "It is." "Then we'll work something out." He stood to leave, paused. "Rhea?" "Yeah?" "You're allowed to accept help without it meaning you failed." He left her with that thought, and she sat on the porch until the stars came out, trying to believe it might be true. The arrangement started small. Dr. Varn would stop by after his morning patients, check her stitches, and stay to help with whatever needed doing. He fixed the well pump one day, patched the chicken coop the next. He didn't ask permission, and she didn't offer it. They just fell into a rhythm that felt less like charity and more like something else. Something she didn't have a name for yet. By the end of the 2nd week, the stitches came out and Rhea was mobile enough to handle the lighter chores. The heavier ones, the fence repairs, the roof work, anything that required bending or lifting, those fell to Varn. He worked with quiet determination, asking questions when he didn't know something, figuring it out when he did. "You're not bad at this," she told him one afternoon. They were mending fence in the south pasture, him holding the wire while she secured it to the post. "My father would be shocked to hear it. He really wanted you to be a builder. Wanted me to be anything but a doctor. Said medicine was for rich men's sons, not the child of an immigrant carpenter." He tested the tension on the wire. He wasn't wrong. Medical school damn near bankrupted us. "But you did it anyway." "But I did it anyway." He moved to the next post. Stubbornness runs in the family, apparently. She almost smiled at that. "Where is he now? Your father?" "Dead, 5 years ago. Heart gave out while he was framing a house in Baltimore." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. He lived exactly the way he wanted, working with his hands, building things that lasted. Can't ask for much more than that." They worked in silence for a while, the sun beating down and the wire cutting into her palms despite the gloves. It was good work, honest work, the kind that left you tired but satisfied at the end of the day. "Your father," Varn said eventually. "What was he like?" Rhea drove a staple into the post with more force than necessary. "Hard, fair, loved this land more than anything else in the world." "More than you?" "I was part of the land. Came with it, I guess." "That's a lonely way to grow up." "Didn't know any different." She moved to the next section. "He taught me everything, how to ride, shoot, work cattle, how to read a sky for weather and a horse for lameness, how to survive. But not how to ask for help. No, that wasn't part of the curriculum." Varn made a sound that might have been sympathy or understanding or both. "My father taught me to build things so solid they'd outlast me. Never taught me what to do when everything I built came crashing down." "That why you left Philadelphia?" "Part of it. Mostly I left because staying meant watching people die for reasons that had nothing to do with medicine and everything to do with money. Got tired of being complicit in that." "So you came to a place where people die for completely different reasons. At least here it's honest. Snakebite, infection, childbirth gone wrong, those I can live with. Letting someone die because they can't afford treatment?" He shook his head. "That I couldn't stomach anymore." They finished the fence line as the sun started its descent toward the horizon. Ria's incision ached and her hands were cramping, but the work was done and done right. That counted for something. "You hungry?" she asked. "Starving." "Come on then, I'll make
This
something
story
that
was
isn't
posted on the
beans."
channel west
She
of
led him back to
Betrayal.
the house,
Please do
acutely
not
aware of how
repost
the
it
place
in
must
any
look to
form.
someone who valued order and cleanliness. But Varn didn't comment on the dust or the clutter or the general air of controlled chaos. He just washed his hands at the pump and sat at the kitchen table like he belonged there. She made fried eggs and cornbread, coffee strong enough to wake the dead. They ate without talking much, the kind of comfortable silence that comes from shared exhaustion. "This is good," he said, gesturing with his fork. "It's eggs. I've had worse eggs." That's not much of a compliment. "Take what you can get." She almost laughed at that, actually felt the urge rise up, and had to swallow it down before it escaped. When was the last time she'd laughed? Couldn't remember. Before her father died, probably. Before the ranch became her entire world. "You should do that more often," Varn said. "What?" "Smile. It suits you." She felt heat rise to her face and blamed it on the coffee. "Don't have much reason to smile. Maybe you should find one. Maybe you should mind your own business." But there was no heat in it, and from the way his eyes crinkled at the corners, he knew it. After he left that night, Ria stood on the porch and watched his horse disappear into the gathering dark. The house felt emptier than usual, the silence heavier. She told herself it was just the exhaustion, the aftermath of surgery and too many hard days. But part of her, a part she didn't want to examine too closely, knew it was more than that. The town noticed, of course. Small towns always did. Sarah Kemp mentioned it first. Casual as poison. "Saw the doctor riding out to your place again. That's what, 3 times this week?" Ria was picking up supplies, trying to get in and out before the afternoon crowd arrived. 4, he's been helping with repairs." "That's awfully kind of him. He's a kind man." Sarah sorted through a bolt of fabric with the focused attention of someone trying very hard to look disinterested. "People are starting to talk, you know." "People always talk." "Yes, but this is different. A man spending that much time at a woman's ranch alone, without a chaperone. We're mending fences, Sarah, not committing sins." "I'm sure that's true. I'm just saying, appearances matter. Especially for a woman in your position, my position. Unmarried, living alone. You have to be more careful than most." Ria set down the sack of flowers she'd been holding. "Let me make sure I understand. I nearly died because I couldn't afford medical care. The doctor saved my life and is now helping me keep my ranch running. And your concern is that people might think we're... what? Involved. I'm just trying to help. Don't. I don't need that kind of help." She paid for her supplies and left before Sarah could say anything else. But the damage was done. The seed was planted, and in a town like Broken Creek, seeds like that grew fast. By the end of the week, she'd heard the whispers, saw the looks. The Robertson brothers showed up again, all false concern and poorly hidden opportunity. "Just worried about your reputation," Robert said. "A woman alone, a man visiting regularly. People draw conclusions. Let them. Might affect your standing in town. Make it harder to do business." "My business is my concern." "Course it is. Just thought you should know if you ever wanted to make things proper. Get married, I mean. Well, there are men who'd overlook certain indiscretions." She understood the threat buried in the offer. "Marry one of us, make it respectable, or watch your reputation, and with it, your ability to operate in this town, crumble into dust." "Get off my land," she said quietly. "Now, Ria, get off my land." They left, but their words lingered like smoke. That night, when Varn showed up to check her recovery, she met him at the property line. "You can't keep coming here," she said. He was still mounted, looking down at her with confusion clear on his face. "What happened?" "Nothing happened. The town's talking." "Let them talk." "Easy for you to say. You're not the one they're calling a whore." The word hung in the air between them, ugly and sharp. Varn dismounted slowly, carefully, like he was approaching a spooked horse. "Who said that to you?" "Doesn't matter." "It matters to me." "Why?" "You've done your good deed. Saved the dying woman, helped fix her ranch. You can go back to town with a clear conscience." That's what you think this is about? My conscience? What else would it be about? He took a step closer, and she held her ground, chin up, daring him to say something that would confirm every suspicion the town had planted in her head. I come here, he said carefully, because I enjoy your company, because working with my hands on something real feels better than sitting in that office waiting for patients who may or may not show up. Because for the first time in 3 years, I feel like I'm doing something that matters. Fixing my fence matters. Spending time with you matters. The honesty of it caught her off guard. She'd been braced for denial or anger or even pity, not this raw admission that mirrored feelings she'd been trying hard not to acknowledge. The town, she started, can go to hell. I don't care what they think. You will when it affects your practice. When people stop coming because they think you're compromised by some arrangement with the woman on the hill, then let them stop coming. I didn't move to Broken Creek to build a thriving practice. I moved here to escape the kind of thinking that values reputation over human decency. That's easy to say now. Wait until you're starving and your principles are all you have to eat. Been there already. It's not as bad as you'd think. They stood facing each other in the fading light, two stubborn people who'd survived too much to back down easily. Finally, Rhea broke the silence. I can't afford another scandal. The bank's already looking for reasons to call my loan. If they think I'm morally compromised, they won't. You don't know that. Then we'll be careful. I'll come during daylight hours only. We'll make sure there are witnesses. Tom Henderson, his ranch hands. Whatever it takes to keep the gossips satisfied. Or you could just stop coming. I could, but I won't. Why are you being so stubborn about this? Because someone needs to be, and you're clearly not going to do it. I'm plenty stubborn. About the wrong things. You'll nearly kill yourself to prove you don't need help, but the minute someone offers companionship, actual friendship, you panic and push them away. That's not... She stopped, because he was right, and they both knew it. I don't know how to do this. Do what? This. Whatever this is. I've spent my whole life keeping people at arm's length because that's safer, easier. And now you're here, and you won't stay at arm's length, and I don't know what to do with that. He smiled at that, a real smile, warm and genuine. You could try just letting it happen, see where it goes. What if it goes somewhere bad? What if it doesn't? She didn't have an answer for that. They stood in the growing darkness, the ranch quiet around them except for the sounds of settling horses and distant coyotes. Stay for dinner, she said finally. But you leave before dark. And tomorrow, bring Tom Henderson with you. Let the town see there's nothing improper happening. All right? And Varn? Yes? Thank you for being stubborn. Right back at you. They managed a fragile peace after that. Varn came by regularly, but always with witnesses, Tom Henderson or one of his hands, sometimes even Sarah Kemp, who Rhea allowed to tag along once out of sheer spite. The town's whispers didn't stop completely, but they quieted to a manageable hum. The ranch improved. With extra hands helping, repairs that had been deferred for years finally got done. The cattle thrived. The mortgage payment went through on time for the first time in 18 months. Rhea started sleeping through the night again. But the peace was temporary, built on foundations that were always going to crack. The first fracture came on a Tuesday afternoon when the bank manager, Samuel Pierce, showed up unannounced. Miss Calder. He dismounted with the careful movements of a man who didn't ride often. I hope I'm not interrupting. She was in the barn, mucking stalls, sweaty, dirty, in no mood for company. What do you want, Samuel? Just wanted to check on things. Make sure you're managing. Managing fine. Good, good. I was concerned, what with your recent illness. I'm recovered. So I hear, and I hear you've had help. Dr. Varn, is it? There it was, the real reason for his visit. He's been helping with repairs, yes. Very generous of him. Samuel walked deeper into the barn, examining it with the practiced eye of a man assessing value. I'll be frank with you, Rhea. The board has some concerns. What kind of concerns? About your ability to manage this property alone, a woman in your position, without male guidance. I've managed fine for 10 years. Have you? Because from where I'm standing, this place is barely holding together. One bad season, one unexpected expense, and you'll default on that loan. I've never missed a payment. You've been late on several, but never missed. True. He stopped in front of her, hands clasped behind his back, which is why I'm here with a solution. The Robertson brothers
This
have made
story
an
was
offer to
posted
purchase
on
your
the channel
mortgage.
west of
They take
Betrayal.
over the payments,
Please do
give
not
you a small
repost
monthly
it in any
stipend,
form.
let you stay on as, well, as a sort of manager. Get out. Now, Rhea, I said get out. This is my land, my ranch, and it's not for sale. Everything's for sale at the right price. Not this. Samuel's expression hardened. You're making this very difficult. The board is trying to help you by taking my land. That's not help. That's theft dressed up in fancy words. You're being emotional. I'm being clear. Get off my property and tell your board that I'll burn this ranch to the ground before I let the Robertsons have it. He left, but his words stayed with her. She knew how this would go. The board would start finding problems with her payments, would scrutinize every transaction, would look for any excuse to call the loan. She'd seen it happen to other ranchers who'd crossed them. When Varn arrived that evening, alone because Tom Henderson was dealing with a sick horse, she was sitting on the porch with her father's rifle across her lap. What happened? He asked. She told him. All of it. Samuel's visit, the Robertson brothers' offer, the implied threat. He listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker with each word. They can't do that, he said finally. They can do whatever they want. They hold the mortgage. There have to be laws. Laws are for people with money and lawyers. I have neither. Then we'll find a way. Fight them. With what? I'm barely keeping my head above water as it is. He paced the length of the porch, thinking, what if you had a partner? Someone to co-sign the mortgage, share the burden? Who would do that? Tom Henderson's got his own ranch to worry about, and anyone else in this town would just be another vulture waiting to pick my bones. I would. She looked up at him, not sure she'd heard right. What? I would partner with you, co-sign the mortgage. You're insane. Probably, but I'm also serious. You don't know anything about ranching. I'm learning. You could lose everything. Wouldn't be the first time. He stopped pacing, faced her. Look, I know this is sudden. I know you value your independence, but right now you need help, and I'm offering it. Not as charity, as a genuine partnership. Why would you risk that? Because I believe in what you're building here. And because... He stopped, seemed to struggle with what to say next. Because I care about you. More than I probably should, given how stubborn and difficult you are. The words sat between them like a live coal. Rhea could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, could feel every defense she'd ever built starting to crumble. You can't care about me, she said quietly. Too late. We barely know each other. I know enough. I know you'd rather die than admit weakness. I know you work yourself to exhaustion because stopping means thinking. I know you're terrified of losing this ranch because it's the only thing connecting you to your father, and losing it would mean losing him all over again. Stop. I know you're brave and stubborn and so damn proud it's going to kill you someday. And I know that despite all of that, maybe because of it, I want to be here, with you, building something that lasts. She stood up, the rifle forgotten on the porch. You don't know what you're asking. I know exactly what I'm asking. If this goes wrong, if the ranch fails, if the town turns on us, then we'll fail together. That's better than failing alone. Is it? Yes. She wanted to believe him, wanted to believe that partnership was possible, that she could share this burden without losing herself in the process. But every lesson her father had taught her, every hard year since his death, said otherwise. I need to think, she said. Take your time. But Rhea? He waited until she met his eyes. Don't take too long. The bank won't wait forever. He left her there on the porch, and she sat back down with the rifle in her lap, watching the stars come out one by one, each one a possibility, each one a risk. By morning, she'd made her decision. She rode into town before dawn, before the streets filled with people who'd judge her choice. Varn's office was dark, but his living quarters above it showed lamplight. She tied Ash to the post and climbed the exterior stairs, knocked once. He opened the door in shirt sleeves and suspenders, hair mussed from sleep. Rhea, What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. She stopped, gathered her courage. Your offer, the partnership, does it still stand? Yes. I'll need to see the terms in writing. Make sure everything's legal and fair. Of course. And we split everything equal. Profits, losses, decisions. I won't be a silent partner in my own ranch. Agreed. And if this goes south, if we lose everything, you can't blame me for it. I won't. She studied his face in the lamplight, looking for deception or doubt or any sign that this was another trap. Found none. All right then, we're partners. He smiled, a real one, bright enough to chase shadows. Partners. They shook on it there in his doorway, and Rhea felt something shift inside her. Not quite hope. She wasn't ready for that yet, but maybe something close. The possibility of it, at least. The paperwork took 3 days to draw up properly. They used a lawyer from the next town over, someone with no stake in Broken Creek's politics. The terms were simple: equal partnership, equal risk, equal say in all ranch decisions. Varn put up half the remaining mortgage value as collateral, effectively making the bank's threats toothless. Samuel Pierce was furious when he found out. You can't do this. The board can review the paperwork if they like, the lawyer said smoothly. Everything's legal and properly filed. Miss Calder now has a partner. The mortgage is current. Unless you have other concerns. Samuel didn't. He left the lawyer's office with his jaw tight and his future threats clearly visible in his eyes. The Robertson brothers took it worse. They showed up at the ranch that evening, both of them, along with 2 hired hands who looked ready for trouble. Rhea met them in the yard with Varn beside her and her father's rifle in easy reach. Heard you got yourself a partner, Robert said. Interesting development. Not really, just good business. That what you're calling it? His eyes flicked between Rhea and Varn with open contempt. Looked more like desperation to me. Call it whatever you want. The ranch isn't for sale. Everything's for sale, you'll figure that out eventually. I don't think so. Varn spoke for the first time, his voice calm but carrying clear warning. Miss Calder has made her position clear. I suggest you respect it. And who are you to suggest anything? You're not from here. Don't understand how things work. I understand just fine. You want the ranch. You tried to buy it cheap through the bank. That failed. So now you're here to intimidate. Watch your mouth and... Or what? You'll threaten me the way you've threatened her? I don't scare easily, Mr. Robertson. For a moment, Rhea thought it would come to violence. The hired hands moved closer, hands drifting toward their belts. But then Robert raised a hand, stopped them. This isn't over, he said. Yes, it is. Rhea's voice cut through the tension like a blade. My land, my choice. And I choose to tell you the same thing I told the bank. Come back here again, and I'll shoot first. Ask questions later. They left, but the threat lingered in the dust they kicked up. Rhea watched them disappear down the road before letting out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. That went well, Varn said dryly. Could have gone worse. True. Nobody got shot. Night's still young. He laughed at that, actual laughter that sounded strange and wonderful in the quiet evening. She found herself smiling in response, the tension draining out of her shoulders. Thank you, she said, for standing with me. That's what partners do. Is it? That's what I'm told. They stood together in the fading light, 2 people who'd survived different kinds of hell and somehow found themselves on the same small piece of Texas dirt, building something neither of them could name yet. And for the first time in longer than she could remember, Rhea felt like maybe, just maybe, she wasn't alone anymore. The partnership changed things in ways Rhea hadn't anticipated. Varn moved some of his belongings to the ranch, clothes, medical supplies, books that lined the shelves her father had built decades ago. He kept his office in town for patients, but spent most evenings and weekends working the land alongside her. They developed routines. He'd check the cattle while she dealt with the chickens. She'd handle repairs requiring precision while he managed anything involving heavy lifting. They cooked together, ate together, sat on the porch after dark, and talked about everything except what was growing between them. Because something was growing. Rhea felt it in the way her chest tightened when he smiled, in how she caught herself watching him work, in the hollow feeling when he had to spend nights in town. She didn't have a name for it, didn't want to name it really, but it was there, persistent as drought. 3 weeks into the partnership, she found him in the barn at dawn, sitting on a hay bale with his head in his hands. "What's wrong?"
This story
she
was
asked.
posted on the
He
channel
looked up
west
and
of
she saw the
Betrayal.
exhaustion in
Please
his
do not
face.
repost it in any
Lost a
form.
patient last night. Sarah Kemp's youngest. Fever, we couldn't break. Rhea sat down beside him. She'd heard the church bells earlier, hadn't thought much of it. "I'm sorry. She was 6 years old. 6, and I couldn't—" His voice cracked. "I tried everything, every treatment I knew. Nothing worked." "Sometimes nothing works. That's not good enough." "No, but it's true." He rubbed his face, shoulders slumped. "You ever wonder if you're doing more harm than good? If maybe you should just stop trying?" "Every day of my life." That got his attention. He looked at her with red-rimmed eyes. "Really? Really? This ranch has been failing since before my father died. Some days I think the kindest thing would be to let it go, sell to whoever wants it, move somewhere easier." She paused. "But I don't. Because giving up isn't the same as letting go. One's surrender, the other's acceptance." "Which is this?" "Us, the partnership. What are we doing?" "Surviving, I think. Together, instead of alone." He nodded slowly, like he was testing the weight of that answer. "You're better at this than I am." "At what?" "Living with failure." "I've had more practice." They sat in the dim barn as the sun rose outside. Two people carrying different ghosts, but sharing the same exhaustion. Eventually Varn stood, rolled his shoulders back. "I should go check on the family, make arrangements." "You want company?" "No. But thank you." He left, and Rhea stayed in the barn thinking about the cost of caring. How every connection was a potential wound. Every person you let close, another way to bleed. Her father had understood that. Had kept himself distant even from her, as if love was a luxury he couldn't afford. But Varn didn't have that distance. Couldn't build those walls. He felt everything. The losses, the failures, the weight of responsibility, and somehow kept going anyway. Maybe that wasn't weakness. Maybe that was a different kind of strength. The thought stayed with her through the day as she worked, through dinner alone, through the long evening waiting for him to return. When he finally rode up near midnight, she was still on the porch. "You should be sleeping," he said. "So should you." He dismounted slowly, moving like every bone ached. "The family's arranging the funeral. I said I'd help with costs. Can you afford that?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." She stood, took Ash's reins. "I'll handle the horse. You go inside, get some rest." "Rhea, go!" He went, too tired to argue. She took care of the horse, checked the barn one last time, then headed inside. Found him asleep on the sofa, still in his dusty clothes, one arm thrown over his face. She got a blanket from the bedroom, draped it over him carefully. His breathing was deep and even, the sleep of total exhaustion. In the lamplight, he looked younger, less guarded, vulnerable in a way he never allowed when awake. She stood there longer than she should have, watching him sleep, feeling something dangerous unfold in her chest. Then she turned down the lamp and went to her own bed, where she lay awake thinking about futures she'd never let herself imagine before. The town's attitude toward them shifted after the funeral. People saw Varn's grief, saw how he paid for a child's burial despite barely making rent on his office, saw Rhea standing beside him at the service, silent support in a black dress someone had lent her. The whispers didn't stop completely, but they changed tone. Less scandal, more curiosity, less judgment, more grudging respect. Sarah Kemp came by the ranch a week later with a basket of preserves. "I wanted to thank you," she said, "for what the doctor did. For our Emma." Rhea took the basket awkwardly. "He's the one who should be thanked. He said you kept him going, that you reminded him why he does this work." Sarah's eyes were still red-rimmed, but her voice was steady. "I was wrong about you two, about what I said before. I'm sorry." "You were protecting your reputation. I understand that." "No, I was being cruel. There's a difference." She glanced toward the barn where Varn was working. "He's a good man. Don't let him slip away because you're too proud to hold on." She left before Rhea could respond, and Rhea stood holding the basket, thinking about holding on and letting go, and the space between them where most of life happened. That evening, she and Varn worked on the books together, going over expenses, planning for winter, arguing about whether they could afford a new bull or should make do with borrowed breeding stock. "We need our own," Varn insisted. "Relying on Henderson's bull means we're at his mercy for breeding season. Henderson's bull is proven stock. Ours would be a gamble. Everything's a gamble. Not when you can't afford to lose." He set down his pencil. "When did you become so risk-averse?" "When I realized losing meant destroying everything my father built." "Your father's dead, Rhea. You don't owe him your whole life." The words hit like a slap. She stood up fast enough to knock her chair over. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" "You work yourself sick trying to live up to a ghost's expectations. Newsflash, you'll never measure up to a dead man's legacy because dead men don't have flaws anymore. They get perfect in memory." "He wasn't perfect, I know that." "Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, you've built your entire identity around being his daughter, his legacy. What happens when you let that go? Who are you then?" "I don't know." The admission came out raw, unexpected. "I don't know who I am without this ranch, without trying to prove I deserved what he left me. Maybe it's time to find out." She wanted to argue, to defend the walls she'd built so carefully, but she was tired of fighting, tired of proving herself, tired of carrying weight that should have been shared years ago. "I'm scared," she said quietly. "Of what?" "Of failing. Of losing this place. Of—" She stopped, couldn't finish. "Of me? Of what you represent. Change. Risk. The possibility of wanting something beyond survival." He came around the table, stood close enough that she could see the gray in his eyes, the tiny scar above his left eyebrow. "What if I'm scared too?" "You don't seem scared." "I'm terrified. I've failed at everything I ever tried to build, my career, my reputation, every relationship I've ever had. And now I'm here, investing everything in a ranch I barely know how to run, and a woman who won't let me close enough to—" He stopped. To what? To matter. To be more than a convenient partner. The truth of it sat between them like something physical. All the careful distance they'd maintained, all the ways they'd pretended this was just business, just survival, stripped away in one honest moment. "You matter," she said. "You matter too much, and that's the problem." "Why is that a problem?" "Because everyone I've ever cared about leaves, dies, disappears, stops mattering, and I can't do that again." "So your solution is to never care? Never risk it?" "It's worked so far." "Has it? Because from where I'm standing, you look miserable." "I'm alive. That counts for something." Alive isn't the same as living. He was too close now, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the dust and sweat, and something underneath that was just him. She should step back, put distance between them, rebuild the walls before they crumbled completely. Instead, she reached up and touched his face, fingers tracing the scar above his eyebrow. "How'd you get this?" she asked. "Bar fight in Baltimore, defending a woman's honor, or so I told myself. Really, I was just drunk and stupid." "You don't seem like the bar fight type." "I wasn't, not usually, but that night I was angry about everything. My father, medical school, the debt, and some asshole said the wrong thing at the right time." "Did you win?" "No. Got my face split open and spent the night in jail. Had to beg the magistrate to let me out for my anatomy exam the next morning." He caught her hand, held it against his face. "Rhea, I need you to be honest with me. Is this just partnership to you? Just business?" "I don't know what this is." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." "Then let me be clear. I care about you, more than I should, more than is probably wise. And I know you feel something too, even if you won't admit it. So I'm asking, do you want me here? Not as a partner, not as help with the ranch. As me, Elias, the man who's falling for you despite every reasonable objection." Her heart was hammering so hard she thought he must be able to hear it. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to protect herself, to rebuild the walls before it was too late. But maybe it was already too late. Maybe it had been too late since he'd found her dying and refused to let her go. I want you here, she whispered. I'm terrified and I don't know how to do this, but I want you here. He kissed her then, soft and careful, like she might break. She kissed him back with 10 years of loneliness and fear and desperate need pouring
This
into
story
him.
was posted
His
on the
hands
channel
found her
West
waist,
of
hers
Betrayal.
tangled in his
Please
hair,
do not
and for a
repost
moment
it
the
in
world
any
narrowed
form.
to just this, two people finding each other in the wreckage of their separate survivals. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, she rested her forehead against his. Now what? She asked. I don't know. I've never gotten this far before. That's reassuring. We'll figure it out. Together. Together. She tested the word, found it fit better than she expected. I'm going to be terrible at this. Probably. I'm not going to be much better. We're a disaster. Best kind of disaster. He kissed her again, slower this time. Should we tell the town? They probably already know. Small town, remember? Fair point? Should we care? She thought about it, about the whispers, the judgment, the Robertsons and their threats. Weighed it against the feeling of his arms around her, the possibility of building something beyond bare survival. No, she said. I don't think we should. They fell into a new rhythm after that. Varn still kept his office in town, but spent more nights at the ranch. They worked side by side during the day and sat close on the porch after dark. Sometimes they talked. Sometimes they just existed together in comfortable silence. The ranch thrived under their combined effort. The cattle fattened on good grass. The repairs held. They even bought that bull, a massive beast named Goliath, who tried to kill Varn twice before settling into grudging cooperation. He hates me, Varn said, watching the bull from a safe distance. He's a bull. He hates everyone. Pretty sure he hates me specifically. That's just his way of showing affection. If that's affection, I'd hate to see anger. But despite Goliath's attitude and the constant work and the town's lingering gossip, Rhea found herself content. Not happy. She wasn't sure she knew how to be happy, but content in a way she'd never been before. Then Samuel Pierce showed up again. It was early October, the heat finally breaking into something manageable. Rhea was mending tack on the porch when he rode up with two men she didn't recognize. Miss Calder, Dr. Varn around? In town. What do you want, Samuel? Just need to discuss some business, about the mortgage. Her stomach dropped. We're current on payments. You are, but there's been some irregularities discovered with the partnership paperwork. What kind of irregularities? Best discuss it with your partner present. These gentlemen are from the State Banking Commission. They'll need to inspect your books. She stood slowly, keeping her voice level. We've done nothing wrong. Then you have nothing to worry about. Samuel's smile was all teeth. We'll wait here while you fetch the doctor. She sent Tom Henderson's son into town at a gallop while she sat on the porch with three men who examined her ranch like vultures sizing up a carcass. They didn't speak to her, didn't explain, just waited with the patient certainty of people who held all the cards. Varn arrived within the hour, his horse lathered from hard riding. He took in the scene with one glance. The strange men, Samuel's smug expression, Rhea's barely controlled fury. What's this about? He asked. Your partnership agreement. There seems to be a problem with the filing. What kind of problem? One of the commission men stepped forward, pulling papers from his satchel. The partnership was registered in Miss Calder's name, with you listed as a co-signer on the mortgage. But according to territorial law, a woman cannot enter into a business partnership without male
This story was
supervision.
posted on
Either
the
a
channel
husband,
West of
father,
Betrayal.
or legal guardian.
Please do not repost
That's
it in any
ridiculous,
form.
Varn said. That's the law, which means your partnership is invalid, which means Miss Calder is still sole owner, which means she's in default on a mortgage she can't afford. Rhea felt the ground shift beneath her. We followed the law, had a lawyer draw up everything proper. A lawyer from Red Mesa, not familiar with our territorial statutes, apparently. Samuel looked almost apologetic. Almost. I'm sorry, Rhea, the bank will have to call the loan. You can't do this. We can. We are. You have 30 days to pay in full or vacate the property. There has to be another option, Varn said. A way to make the partnership legal. There is. Samuel's smile widened. Marriage. A husband can enter into partnership with his wife. that would satisfy the law. The trap snapped shut. Marry Varn or lose everything. They'd backed her into a corner so neat it was almost admirable. Give us time to think about it, Varn said. Clock's ticking, Doctor. 30 days. They left, taking their certainty and their legal paperwork with them. Rhea stood in the yard watching them disappear, feeling everything she'd built crumbling around her. They planned this, she said, from the beginning. Let us think we'd won, then pulled the rug out. We'll fight it. Get a better lawyer. Challenge the law. With what money? What time? They've got us, Elias. They finally got us. He grabbed her shoulders, forced her to look at him. Then we do what they want. We get married. That's not... We can't just... Why not? We're already living together, already partners in everything but name. Because marriage isn't a business transaction. It's supposed to mean something. It does mean something. It means we fight together instead of alone. It means we don't let bastards like Samuel Pierce win. That's not a reason to get married. No? He pulled her closer. How about this then? I love you. I've loved you since you collapsed in my office and told me you didn't need help. I love your stubbornness and your pride and the way you won't quit even when quitting would be smarter. I love that you feed the chickens first every morning and you always save the burnt cornbread for yourself. I love that you're terrible at asking for help, but you're learning. I love you, Rhea Calder. Is that a good enough reason? The words hit her like a physical blow. She'd never expected them, never let herself hope for them. And now here they were, offered in the middle of a crisis, wrapped in desperation and defiance. I don't know how to do this, she said. Do what? Love someone. Let someone love me. I don't know if I can. Then we'll figure it out together. Same way we figured out everything else. She looked at him, really looked at him, saw the fear underneath the determination, the vulnerability he was offering despite knowing she might reject it. He was risking everything on her answer, his future, his heart, whatever fragile piece he'd found here. And she realized something. She'd already made her choice, had made it weeks ago, maybe months, had made it the moment she let him stay, let him help, let him matter. All right, she said. All right? Let's get married. Not because the bank says we have to, because She stopped, forced herself to say it. Because I love you too. And I'm tired of being afraid of that. He kissed her then, hard and desperate, and she kissed him back with everything she had. When they pulled apart, both were crying. We're still a disaster, she said. Best kind. They married 3 days later in front of the magistrate, with Tom Henderson and his wife as witnesses. Rhea wore the same black dress from the funeral. Varn wore his good shirt with the collar she'd mended. The ceremony took 5 minutes. Afterward, Tom's wife hugged her tight. Your father would be proud. Rhea wasn't sure about that. Her father had never trusted happiness, had never believed in anything softer than survival. But maybe that was the point. Maybe she didn't need his approval anymore. Maybe she could build something he'd never imagined, something better than just enduring. They filed the new partnership papers the next day. Samuel Pierce accepted them with visible disappointment, but no grounds for rejection. The ranch was safe. The marriage was legal. They'd won. But that night, lying in bed beside her husband, the word still felt strange, Rhea stared at the ceiling and wondered what came next. You're thinking too loud, Varn mumbled beside her. Can't help it. What about? Everything, the ranch, the town, whether we just made a huge mistake. He rolled over, pulled her close. You want to know what I think? Sure. I think we survived things that should have killed us. I think we found each other against all odds in a town that wanted to keep us separate. I think whatever comes next, we'll handle it, together. That simple? That's simple. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that love and partnership were enough against whatever the world threw at them. But she'd learned young that wanting and having were different things. Still, she had him here, solid and warm beside her, had the ranch under their combined names, had a future that looked less like survival and more like living. Maybe that was enough. Maybe that was everything. Elias? She whispered. Yeah? Thank you. For not giving up on me. Right back at you. They fell asleep
This
tangled
story was
together.
posted
Two
on the
stubborn
channel
people
west
who'd
of
survived by
Betrayal.
refusing to break.
Please do not
Finally
repost
learning
it in
that
any
sometimes
form.
strength meant letting someone else carry part of the weight. Outside, the Texas night settled in around the ranch. The same stars her father had navigated by, the same wind that had tested every generation of Calders. But tomorrow the sun would rise on something new, not just survival, but the possibility of something more. The first real test of their marriage came 6 weeks later when winter arrived early and brutal. The temperature dropped 20 degrees overnight, catching them with half the cattle still in the summer pasture and the barn roof only partially repaired. Rhea woke to ice on the windows and Varn already gone from bed. She found him in the barn, trying to reinforce the weak section of roof before the snow got heavier. "Should have done this weeks ago," he muttered, hammering boards into place with cold, stiffened fingers. "We were busy with other things." "We were. Now we're paying for it." She climbed up beside him, started handing him nails. They worked in tense silence, both knowing what neither wanted to say. They'd made mistakes, had let themselves get distracted by being newlyweds, by the novelty of partnership, by believing they had more time. The roof held through that first storm, but barely. Water leaked into the northwest corner, ruining half their winter feed. They lost 3 calves to the cold despite working around the clock to keep them warm. And Tom Henderson showed up mid-blizzard to say his fence line had collapsed. Rhea's cattle were mixed with his, and it would take weeks to sort out who owned what. "This is my fault," Rhea said one night. They were eating cold beans because the stove had gone out, and neither had the energy to restart it. "I got soft. Let things slide because I was too busy playing house." "Don't do that." "Do what?" "Blame yourself for being human, for wanting something beyond work and survival." "My father never." "Your father's dead, and from what you've told me, he died alone and miserable, having pushed away everyone who might have cared. That what you want? That the legacy you're protecting?" The words were harsh but not wrong. She'd spent so many years trying to live up to a ghost's standards that she'd never stopped to question if those standards were worth meeting. "I don't know what I want anymore," she admitted. "Yes, you do. You want the ranch to survive. You want us to survive. You want to build something that lasts. The difference is, now you're not trying to do it alone." "Feels like I'm failing anyway." "We're not failing. We hit a rough patch. That's not the same thing." But it felt like failing. Felt like every mistake was proof she'd been right all along. That letting someone in, that caring about anything beyond bare survival, was a weakness she couldn't afford. The winter got worse before it got better. They burned through their savings, keeping the stock alive. Varn's practice suffered because he couldn't be in 2 places at once. The bank started making noises about the spring payment. And through it all, the Robertson brothers circled like wolves, waiting for the moment when exhaustion and desperation made her vulnerable again. Robert showed up in January, his breath fogging in the frozen air. "Heard you're having trouble," he said. "Cattle losses, feed costs. That new husband of yours burning through money faster than you can make it." Rhea met him at the property line, rifle in hand. "What do you want, Robert?" "Just checking on a neighbor." "We're not neighbors. We're people who happen to live near each other and hate each other's guts. There's a difference." "No need for hostility. I'm here with an offer." "Not interested." "You haven't heard it yet." "Don't need to. The answer's no." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Your pride's going to kill you someday, Rhea, just like it killed your father." "My father died of a heart
This
attack."
story was posted on the channel
he?
west of
Or
Betrayal.
did he die from working
Please do not
himself to death
repost
trying
it
to
in
prove
any
he
form.
didn't need anyone? Robert leaned against his horse. "You're following the same path, too stubborn to ask for help, too proud to admit when you're in over your head. Mark my words. By spring, you'll be begging me to take this place off your hands. Get off my land. Our land. This whole valley used to belong to my family before squatters like your father carved it up. I'm just reclaiming what's rightfully mine. You're rewriting history to justify theft. Now get out before I shoot you for trespassing." He left, but his words stayed with her. Not because they were true. She knew what the Robertsons were, knew their claim to the land was based on violence and forged deeds. But because part of what he said hit too close. She was following her father's path, working herself to exhaustion, pushing away comfort, treating every offer of help as an insult. That night she found Varn in his makeshift office, a corner of the living room where he kept his medical books and tried to manage the ranch accounts. "We need to talk," she said. He looked up, exhausted. "About? About how we're doing this all wrong." "I'm listening." She sat down across from him, chose her words carefully. "I've been thinking about what Robert said. Not the part about stealing our land. That's just him being an asshole. But the part about following my father's path. You're nothing like your father, aren't I? I'm working us both to death trying to prove I can handle this. Turning down help because accepting it feels like failure. Treating every setback like a personal failing instead of just life. Where's this coming from? From watching you barely sleep for 3 weeks. From seeing the lines around your eyes get deeper. From realizing that marriage means I'm not just destroying myself anymore. I'm destroying you too." He reached across the desk, took her hand. "You're not destroying anyone." "Then why does it feel like we're drowning?" "Because winter's hard. Because we made some mistakes. Because running a ranch while I'm trying to maintain a medical practice was always going to be brutal." He squeezed her hand. "But we're not drowning. We're treading water. There's a difference." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that persistence was enough. But she'd learned young that sometimes persistence was just another word for stubborn refusal to accept reality. "What if we can't do both?" she asked quietly. "The ranch and your practice? Then we choose." "Just like that?" "Just like that. We're partners, Rhea, which means we make decisions together. Neither of us has to carry everything alone anymore." The concept was still foreign to her, this idea that burden could be shared, that choosing one path didn't mean failing at another. But she was learning. Slowly, painfully, but learning. "If we had to choose," she said carefully, "which would you pick?" "Honestly, the ranch. I became a doctor to help people, but I can do that anywhere. Here, with you, building something that matters, that's what I want." "You'd give up medicine?" "I'd give up a formal practice. Still treat people who need it, still keep my skills sharp. But yes, if it came down to it, I'd choose this. Choose us." The certainty in his voice shook something loose inside her. All her life she'd been taught that caring too much was weakness, that needing someone made you vulnerable. But maybe vulnerability wasn't weakness. Maybe it was just being honest about what mattered. "I'm scared," she admitted, "of losing this place, of failing you, of proving everyone right who said I couldn't do this. Everyone's scared. The difference is whether you let fear run your life or just inform your decisions. When did you get so wise?" "I'm not wise. I'm just tired of fighting against something instead of for it." She understood what he meant. She'd spent so many years fighting against failure, against judgment, against the memory of her father's disappointment. Maybe it was time to fight for something instead. For the ranch, yes, but also for the life they were building, for the possibility of something more than survival. "Okay," she said. "So what do we do?" They made a plan that night. Varn would reduce his practice to 2 days a week, focusing on the ranch the rest of the time. They'd hire Tom Henderson's oldest boy to help with the heavy work. Cost money they didn't really have, but would save Varn's back and give them time to actually think instead of just react. And they'd stop trying to do everything perfectly. Some things could wait. Some repairs could be makeshift. Some standards could slip without the world ending. It felt like surrender at first, like admitting defeat. But as winter slowly loosened its grip and spring started to show itself in small ways, warmer days, early grass, calves being born healthy and strong, Rhea realized it wasn't surrender, it was strategy. They lost the cattle sorting war with Henderson, but he offered a fair price for the mixed stock and they didn't fight him on it. The northwest corner of the barn still leaked, but they moved the feed and stopped worrying about it. Varn's practice shrank, but his remaining patients were loyal, and word spread that he was honest and skilled and didn't price gouge. Slowly, impossibly, things stabilized. The spring mortgage payment came due in April. Rhea rode into town alone to deliver it, half expecting Samuel Pierce to find some new way to reject it. But he took the money without comment, marked the ledger, and dismissed her with barely a word. She was halfway out the door when he spoke again. "Your father would be proud, you know." She turned. "What?" He was a stubborn bastard who wouldn't ask for help if his life depended on it. Died because of it, probably. But he loved this land, and he'd be glad to see it thriving. Samuel's expression was unreadable, even if the methods would have horrified him. What methods? Partnership, marriage, actually accepting help instead of martyring yourself. He almost smiled. You're better at this than he ever was. She left before he could say anything else, rode home through the spring sunshine trying to figure out if she'd just been complimented or insulted. Decided it was probably both. Varn was in the south pasture when she got back, helping young Billy Henderson repair a gate. They were laughing about something. Billy had that teenage earnestness that made everything seem urgent and important. Watching them together, she felt something shift in her chest. This was her family now. Not blood, not inherited, but chosen. Built from scratch in the wreckage of separate survivals. That night they sat on the porch as the sun set, drinking coffee and watching the cattle graze. Pierce said something strange today, Rhea said. Strange how? Said my father would be proud, that I'm better at this than he was. He's right. You never knew my father. Don't need to, I know you. Know how hard you've worked to live up to his memory. But you've already surpassed him. You just haven't realized it yet. How do you figure? You're still here, still fighting, but you're not doing it alone anymore. You let people in, let them help, let them matter. Your father never did that. Died alone because he was too proud to need anyone. She thought about that, about her father's last years, the isolation he'd wrapped around himself like armor. Had convinced himself it was strength, when really it was just fear dressed up in different clothes. I don't want to die alone, she said quietly. You won't. I'll be right here, annoying you until the end. Promise? Promise. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars came out. Rhea felt Varn's hand find hers, their fingers tangling together with the ease of practice. This was what she'd been afraid of, this quiet intimacy, this sense of belonging. Turned out it wasn't nearly as terrifying as she'd imagined. Summer came hard and fast, bringing work that never seemed to end, but they managed it together, falling into rhythms that felt less like choreography and more like breathing, natural, essential. The town's attitude continued to shift. People stopped whispering about scandal and started asking for advice, how they'd made the partnership work, how they balanced Varn's practice with the ranch demands, how Rhea had convinced the bank to accept a woman in business. Sarah Kemp became an unlikely ally, spreading the word that Dr. Varn was reliable and his wife was tougher than boot leather but fair in her dealings. Tom Henderson started sending other ranchers their way when they needed medical care or help with difficult livestock. Even the Robertsons seemed to back off, though Rhea suspected that was less respect and more waiting for a better opportunity. In July, Rhea realized she was pregnant. She sat on the examination table in Varn's office, watching him process the information. He'd done the exam himself, all professional detachment and careful questions. But now that it was confirmed, the professional mask was cracking. You're sure? She asked. I'm sure. About 3 months along, I'd say. 3 months and I didn't notice. You've been busy. That's not an excuse. It's not an excuse. It's just a fact. He sat down beside her, took her hand. How do you feel about this? Terrified? You? Same. Also excited. Also completely unprepared. We don't have to do this. There are ways. Do you want to? The question hung between them. Rhea thought about her mother, dead in childbirth, about her father raising a daughter alone and resenting her for surviving when his
This
wife
story
died.
was posted
About
on the
all the ways
channel west
parenthood
of
could go
Betrayal.
wrong.
Please
But she
do not
also thought about
repost
Billy
it in any
Henderson's
form.
laugh, about the possibility of teaching someone to love this land the way she did, about Varn holding a child that was half her, half him, entirely theirs. Yeah, she said. I think I do. Then we'll figure it out. Same way we figured out everything else. You say that a lot, because it keeps being true. The pregnancy complicated everything. Rhea had to cut back on the heavy work, which meant hiring more help, which meant more money going out when they were already stretched thin. Her body betrayed her in new ways. Exhaustion that no amount of sleep could fix, nausea that struck at random, a fragility she hated and couldn't escape. Varn tried to help but mostly just hovered, making her want to throw things at him. "I'm pregnant, not dying," she snapped one afternoon when he tried to take a feed bucket from her hands. "I know that." "Then stop treating me like I'm made of glass." "I'm trying to help." "You're smothering me." He stepped back, hands raised. "You're right. I'm sorry." The fight went out of her as quickly as it had risen. "No, I'm sorry. I don't know how to do this. Be vulnerable. Let someone take care of me." I know. But you're going to have to learn. Because in 6 months, there's going to be someone even more vulnerable who needs both of us. The thought terrified her more than anything else. She'd survived by being hard, by refusing to break. How was she supposed to raise a child when she barely knew how to be soft? The answer came in pieces, over months. Watching Varn with the animals, gentle but firm, patient but unyielding. Listening to Sarah Kemp talk about her surviving children, the grief and joy tangled together. Learning from Billy Henderson's mother that parenthood was mostly just showing up every day and doing your best, even when your best felt inadequate. By the time Rhea went into labor in the middle of January, because of course the baby would arrive during another brutal winter, she'd made peace with her own uncertainty. She didn't have to be perfect. She just had to be there. The birth was long and difficult. Varn delivered the baby himself, his hands steady even though his face was white with fear. When he finally placed their daughter on Rhea's chest, red-faced and screaming, perfect in her fury, she felt something break open inside her. "She's beautiful," Varn whispered, his voice rough. "She's angry. Takes after her mother." Funny, but she was smiling through the exhaustion and pain, looking down at this impossible thing they'd created. This tiny person who was already demanding things with the force of her screams. They named her Elizabeth, after Varn's mother, called her Beth for short, and she was everything Rhea had feared and everything she hadn't known she needed. The ranch work got harder with an infant. There were nights when Rhea walked the floor with a screaming baby while Varn delivered a calf in the barn. Days when they were both so tired they could barely speak. Moments when Rhea questioned every choice that had brought them here. But there were also moments of quiet perfection. Beth sleeping on Varn's chest while he read medical journals. The first time she smiled, a real smile, not gas. The way she grabbed Rhea's finger with surprising strength and refused to let go. "She's stubborn," Varn observed one evening. "Wonder where she gets that." It's a mystery. Beth was 6 months old when the Robertsons made their final play. They'd been quiet for too long, and Rhea had let herself hope they'd given up. Stupid. Robert showed up with papers, legal documents claiming that the original land grant for the Calder Ranch had been fraudulent, that his family had prior claim, that Rhea had 30 days to vacate or face eviction. "This is bullshit," she said, reading through the documents. "It's legal, filed proper with the territorial courts. It's based on forged records. My father bought this land legitimate, paid for it in full. Prove it." That was the problem. Her father's records were sparse. A few receipts, a handwritten deed that might or might not hold up in court. Nothing that could definitely prove the Robertsons' claim was false. "We'll fight this," Varn said that night. They were in the kitchen, Beth asleep in her cradle, going through every scrap of paper her father had left behind. "With what money? Legal battles cost more than we have." "Then we'll find it. Sell cattle, take out a loan. We're already mortgaged to the hilt. Nobody's going to lend us more." "Then we'll ask for help. Tom Henderson, Sarah Kemp, the other ranchers who've benefited from your work. I'm not begging. It's not begging. It's community. It's what people do." But asking for help still felt like failure, even after everything she'd learned. Old habits died hard. The answer came from an unexpected source. Samuel Pierce showed up at the ranch 3 days later with a box of documents. "What's this?" Rhea asked. "Records from the bank. Your father's mortgage payments, original land surveys, correspondence with the territorial office." He set the box on the porch. "Everything you need to prove the Robertsons are lying." "Why are you helping us?" "Because I'm tired of watching them manipulate the system. Your father was a pain in the ass, but he was honest. The Robertsons are neither." He tipped his hat. "Good luck in court." The documents were exactly what they needed. Clear proof that the land had been surveyed and sold legally, that the Robertsons' claim was based on a grant that had been revoked decades ago for fraud. The judge threw out their case in less than an hour. Robert Robertson stood outside the courthouse, face purple with rage. "This isn't over." "Yes," Rhea said calmly, "it is. You lost. Accept it and move on. I'll ruin you, destroy everything you've built. You can try, but you know what I've learned? I'm not alone anymore, and that makes me a lot harder to destroy than you think." She walked away from him, from the courthouse, from the last threat her father's enemies could throw at her. Varn was waiting with Beth, and together they rode home through the spring sunshine. That night, with Beth asleep between them and the ranch quiet around them, Rhea finally let herself believe they might actually make it. "What are you thinking?" Varn asked. "That we did it, survived everything they threw at us. We did. Think it's over now? The fighting, the threats? Probably not. There'll always be something. That's just life. Comforting. But we'll handle it together." Together. The word that had terrified her once now felt like the strongest thing she owned. Years passed. Beth grew into a wild thing who loved the horses and had her mother's stubbornness and her father's curiosity. They added to the herd, improved the land, built a life that looked nothing like survival and everything like living. Varn's practice stabilized at a comfortable size, enough to help people, not so much that it consumed him. He taught Beth about medicine, about caring for things beyond yourself. Rhea taught her about the land, about persistence, about choosing strength over surrender. Tom Henderson retired and sold them his adjacent property, doubling their land. The bank, under new management after Samuel Pierce finally retired, offered favorable terms on the expansion. The Robertsons moved to California, chasing easier marks. On Beth's 10th birthday, Rhea stood on the porch watching her daughter teach a new calf to lead. Varn came up beside her, slipped an arm around her waist. "You did good," he said. "We did good." "That too." She leaned into him, comfortable in a way she'd never imagined possible. "You think she'll want this? The ranch? The life?" "Does it matter? She'll choose what she chooses, same as you did." "I didn't choose this. I inherited it." "You chose to keep it, to fight for it, to build something better than what you inherited." He kissed her temple. "That's not the same as just accepting what you're given." He was right. She'd spent so many years thinking she was just preserving her father's legacy, when really she'd been building her own, something that honored where she came from but wasn't limited by it. Beth finished with the calf and ran toward the house, all long legs and wild hair. "Mama, Papa, watch this!" They watched, they laughed, they lived. And years later, when Rhea was old and gray and sitting on that same porch with Varn beside her, both of them creaky and scarred and still stubbornly alive, she would look back on her life and realize something. Strength wasn't about never breaking. It was about breaking and choosing to rebuild. It was about accepting help when you needed it and offering it when you could. It was about letting people matter, even when mattering meant risking pain. Her father had been strong in his way, rigid, unbending, alone. She'd been terrified of being anything less. But she'd learned a different kind of strength, the kind that bent without breaking, the kind that asked for help and offered it freely, the kind that built partnerships instead of fortresses, the kind that chose love over fear, even when fear felt safer. Beth took over the ranch eventually, running it with her husband and their children, expanded it further, modernized it, turned it into something even more than Rhea and Varn had built. And when Rhea finally died, peacefully,
This
in
story
her
was
sleep,
posted
with
on the
Varn's
channel
hand in
West of
hers,
Betrayal.
she went knowing
Please
she'd
do not
done what her
repost
father
it
never
in
could.
any form.
She'd built something that would outlast her, not through force or stubbornness or sheer refusal to quit, but through connection, through choosing people over pride, through learning that the strongest thing you can do isn't surviving alone. It's building something worth surviving for, with people worth surviving with. The Calder Ranch stood for another 100 years after Rhea's death, and people told stories about the woman who'd nearly died from stubbornness, who'd learned to live instead, who'd proven that strength and softness weren't opposites but partners, just like everything worth keeping.